Expect the best used car deals guaranteed. Visit arnoldclark.com.
Welcome to Peter and Roughie's Football Show, sponsored by Arnold Clark. I'm Peter Martin, Alan Rough, Hugh McDonald and Steven Naismith here with me on this Thursday. Great to have your company. Hit the follow button. You can share the stream and, of course, you can subscribe on our YouTube channel as well to join the football family here talking about football Monday to Friday at 4 o'clock. Hopefully, you can join us all throughout the summer as well. We'll have some special programmes for you. But as we get ready to hit the end of the season, still relegation still to be determined in the Premiership. Will there be someone coming up from the Championship? There's lots to discuss, and of course in the company of the guys here, delighted that Hugh and Stevie can make it. Wasn't so sure Roughie would make it after one heck of a session yesterday, Roughie, but apparently you're okay. You've managed to recover.
Yeah, I think Steve will admit when you win something you have to celebrate. You don't get many opportunities, and certainly the players certainly enjoyed the free bar for 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock at night. So I'd love to see the state of them when they get up the road. But no, it was just good to see everybody celebrating it, and that's what football's all about. When you get a chance to win something, it's what you should do, because it doesn't come along enough for a lot of clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. You should have enjoyed it. And of course, it would have been an emotional day for you yesterday, Roughie, because if you start drinking at 11 o'clock in the morning and you're absolutely bladdered, must have brought memories back of the night before the Brazil game in '82. No, it didn't. I know, I'm only winding you up. Anyway, let's crack on with some of the news stories. Following this morning's SFA hearing, John Hughes has been served with a 4-match touchline ban, of which 2 are suspended. John will serve the touchline ban over the 2 remaining fixtures this season. And, of course, as ever, club making no further comment on it. So John Yogi Hughes, like many managers, picking up bans for saying things out of turn. So he'll sit out the last 2 games. And that, I would presume, is not ideal, Roughie, when you consider what's at stake for Ross County. He'll be kicking every ball from the stand.
Yeah, but fortunately enough, these stands aren't too far away for the playing surface. I'm sure Yogi will find a seat somewhere that is as near the touchline as possible, and I'm sure the players will definitely hear him, because that's what kind of manager he is. So he's fortunate he's not in a massive big stadium, particularly in the home games. So no, I think the managers know what they're going to get now. They're quite happy to take the 2 games, just to get it off their chest and then move on. And I think they all seem to be doing it now. But you get 2 games and then you just move on, but you've said your piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And lots of people wishing you the very best, Roughie and the Partick Thistle team, for all their efforts. It's been a great season to get back into the Championship. Okay, Stephen, the Scottish football writers have spoken. I'll get Hughes' take on it in a minute, but the Scottish football writers have spoken. They've announced their Young Player of the Year earlier in the week, and now they've announced the Player of the Year nominees, and there they are: Connor Golson, James Tavernier, Stephen Davis and Alan McGregor. So a clean sweep, all 4 Rangers players, Stephen, and I think it's only a matter of time before they announce Ibrox as the Stadium of the Year, and the Kitman as well will get a nomination, Stephen. It's a clean sweep here at Ibrox.
That is so, and to be fair, rightly so. I think in this category anyway, when I seen the nominations coming out, there was nobody that sprung to my mind that I thought you'd put him in instead, or I can't believe he's not been nominated over anybody that has. Of the 4, I think people can relate to Tavernier and Golson's Rangers career, how it started off. They've went through sticky patches within that, and they've came out the other end, and they're very integral parts of the team. But I would say Davis and McGregor are the guys who have contributed the most in what has been such a big season all round. And for me, I think Griggs and McGregor should get it, because as much as they've been the best team and they've conceded the least amount of goals, if you look at the defence, he's probably the one that saved them the most with some of the saves he's made. And it's okay saying, oh, he's made good saves when they were up 2 or 3-0, but he's actually made a lot of very big saves at crucial periods in games. So I think if anybody deserves it the most, it's probably Alan McGregor. But there's no surprises overall with the nominations.
Yeah, I can't argue with you. I mean, even if I was racking my brains, Hugh, for somebody out with the Rangers 4, I was really struggling, and I think that's the evidence of how strong they've been. In fact, earlier this season, probably January, February, I was thinking to myself, Tavernier all the way. But because of this strong finish, I mean, he's just been unbelievable. For me, I think McGregor gets it.
Well, I was thinking as well, because, you know, I like to have an argument, Peter, and as soon as somebody comes up with any list or all that, the first thing you look at and say, no, I'm going to have an argument. There's no way that, you know, 4 Rangers players should have a, you know, a kind of blue wash of the awards. Then you sit down, you say, well, can it be any Celtic player, really? I mean, the best Celtic player this season's been David Turnbull, but not enough to put him in for any player of the year. And then you look at the rest of the league. I would say the best player outside Rangers and Celtic is Boyle of Hibs. I would think he would be the player that, you know, that could be around the first team of Celtic and Rangers. But he's had an intermittent season, Peter. You know, he's played well at some times and played not so well at other times. So it comes down to the Rangers players. And I think it's the strongest 4. I'm going to be really picky on it because you're mentioning you know, it's the biggest, you know, one of the biggest awards, Player of the Year, Writers' Player of the Year, and I'm going to rule out Goldson and Tavernier because I'm never fully convinced about them both. I'm talking about the real highest level. I know they've had great seasons, but I'm never. You can't give it. I was swithering about giving it to McGregor, and you can't give it to McGregor because he's a goalkeeper, right? And if you start giving it to goalkeepers, you get Roughie into halls of fame. You get Roughie getting invited to things like that. What we've got to remember is goalkeepers are not football players, right? So how can you be footballer of the year if you're a goalkeeper? Because you're not a footballer. You're a handball. You're a handballer.
Can I nail?
Right?
Can I nail that for you for just one thing?
Pick, goalie.
I just want to nail it on one thing, Q. See that argument that you're making there? That argument for me is absolutely fantastic. Until the other night there, when the Manchester City goalkeeper drops a left footer right on his toe and completely splits the defence. I mean, come on, Hugh. That guy can play central midfield.
Of course, I mean, I'm only half joking, but I mean now goalkeepers, of course, have got to be full. I think the first big mover in that was Neuer, wasn't he, with Bayern Munich? He ended up playing sweeper, and you see it now all the time. I think Edwin van der Sar at Manchester United was a fantastic long passer as well. So, and we all know now they've got to play with their feet. Roughie actually was supposed to be not bad playing outfielder. I've done a wee scouting report on Roughie, back in the day. Roughie was apparently all right. But anyway, this is a long-winded way, Peter. This is my BBC answer. It's probably going to have to go into an extra show. Well,
see what I told you, Stephen?
But
3,000 words.
I'm going to go for
30 would do.
Stephen Davis. I'm going to go with Stephen Davis because every time I've watched him this season, I watched him last week playing against Celtic, and just see everything he does is just right. He just does everything right. It's right, look dead simple and all that, but it's just right. And so I'm just going to Stephen Davis for me.
Well, that's all we have time for now. That was great. I really enjoyed the show. It's been absolutely fantastic. Go on, Stephen.
Just a couple things. On Hughes' point there on the goalie, right? It shows you how good a season he's been. He's been in the best defensive team of the league. So he shouldn't be in the top 4, but he is because he's been that good in terms of the saves. And the only debate about players is whether Kent or Kamara could be in it, other than any other players, really.
Yeah,
right,
I mean,
as far as goalkeeper concerned, I rest my case. Ask Liverpool if they had a decent goalkeeper, whether they'd have won the Champions League. I rest my case there. And the other thing is, the sports writers are a very sentimental bunch when it comes to the Player of the Year awards. They like to award it to somebody who served the game well, obviously had a good season, and they like them. And that means that it's going to be Davis or McGregor.
Yeah.
That's the way the votes go.
So you actually think that the journos
You've
are
got
a
to have a good
sentimental
season.
bunch?
No, you've got to have a good season. But when it becomes a
Yeah.
sort of a level playing field, they tend to go for somebody that they like.
Oh,
And that's
right.
That's why one of these
Well,
two, they're coming to the end of their career, and they'll get the vote.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, by the way,
Are you saying they don't deserve it?
No, I'm saying when it comes level, when it's a level peg, what sways you towards who's going to get it. It might be Giggsy's last season, it might be Davis's, and that's how they vote.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have to beg to differ because, Hugh, to have sentimentality, you need to have a heart. And as you know, many of the journos are lacking in that, to be perfectly honest with you. They're not sentimental, that bunch. They're ruthless.
I would like to say the year that I won it wasn't sentimental. I was just top class that year.
By the way, Robbie Ferguson has sent a message. He says, Hugh, what a load of garbage. This was when you were getting through your narrative on you can't give it to a keeper. Robbie, calm down. He's only kidding. You need to get to know Hugh and where he's going with it. But listen, McGregor's been absolutely top drawer. I mean, some of his saves have been out of out of this world. I mean, not only I have to say domestically, Roughie, but in Europe as well. He's produced some unbelievable saves.
I've said this on numerous occasions. He can make saves at any game. And any good goalkeeper will make good saves. The good goalkeepers make the big saves. And that's all he's did all year. He's made the big saves. I mean, even last week, the Rangers versus Celtic game when Rangers won 4-1, I pick up the papers the next day and the star man's Alan McGregor because of the saves he made in that game. And the saves he made in that game turned the game Rangers' way, along with obviously a lot of other things. But the main thing was he's a match winner. And he's proved it all year. And as you say, particularly in Europe, with the saves he's had in Europe, that's turned the games as well. And that's why he would get my vote.
Well, here's a question for you, Ruffy, before we obviously move on. And lots of people have offered their thoughts on this. Who's the better goalkeeper? Is it McGregor or Gorham over the piece now?
Oh, that is a really tough question. It is a really tough one. I know you want me to say one of them, but I would. I don't know. I honestly don't. I don't know how to get a Hughie answer here. I don't know how I can talk enough to convince myself it's one or the other.
How about giving us the surname of the answer I'm looking for?
I'm going to go for Andy. I'm going to go for the goalie. Different kind of goalkeeper for Alan. Obviously short in height, but makes the saves. And if Tommy Burns said that it was a death nail for him in the league deciders, that's good enough for me, because he did make, like Alan McGregor did that particular season, he made the saves that broke Celtic's heart. So I would probably go for the goalie. Just.
All right. Quite a few people are changing their minds. Stephen, where's your money?
I find it difficult because I've played with Griggsy throughout my career. And top goalie for me, he's with the best I've played with. But like I said, overall, I think he should win it for what he's done this season. The point alone that he's in the reckoning, because he's been in the best defensive team, he should win it. And with him and Andy Gorham, I would say Griggsy because I played with him, but I grew up watching Andy Gorham, who was sensational, to be honest.
Yeah, Hugh, it's a tough call.
Where would you go? I'd go for Gorham, and I would really, up until a couple of seasons ago, I'd have gone with Gorham all day, all night. I mean, I wouldn't have brooked any argument. I think McGregor has forced himself very strongly into the argument now. The only reason I would go for Gorham, Peter, is that I remember watching Rangers in the Champions League season in the early 90s when they got to really what was a semi-final of the Champions League. I know it wasn't billed that way, and he was playing against outstanding teams at that time, Marseille, great Leeds team, etc., etc. And he was just unbelievable. And I remember one of my son's first Scotland games, which was at Ibrox for the redevelopment of Hampden, when Scotland were playing against Portugal and Futre was coming clear on goal. And there was just a sense sitting in the stands that this wasn't a problem. Gorham will save it. You know, it's 1-on-1, but Gorham will save it. And there was even a kind of ripple of anxiety in the stand, and of course he did save it. And I just think that sort of feeling that you had of at that time of just being invincible must have broke the hearts of so many opposition teams, not least Celtic, of course, but other teams as well. I just think, see, at that time, he was in the argument for the best goalkeeper in the world at that time, Peter, I think.
Oh, now that's a totally different debate, Hugh. And, you'd have to actually look at the kind of keepers who were around in that decade. I'm going to look into that, because I did slaughter you yesterday, Hugh, because, you've just made a statement there that's open to a whole show's debate. And we were talking yesterday about great players on air. And I mentioned that we made a programme on the all-time top Scottish players. And I can remember sitting at the desk with you and 4 or 5 other esteemed colleagues, journalists, ex-footballers, and I had to fight tooth and nail to try and get John Robertson of Nottingham Forest into that 11. And I looked at the whole 4 or 5 of you and I thought, wow, this is a guy who's won 2 European Cups, and you're not even backing me on it. He wasn't getting in your book.
Yeah, I was wrong on that. See, the great thing about life is changing. More and more I think about that, yeah. Robertson, absolutely outstanding. I can't even remember who would have it at the left wing instead of him. Maybe, but Robertson, yeah, you were right on that. I'll take the brickbacks for that.
Yep, absolutely. I think you'd gone for own Archdeacon. Anyway, let's. By the way, a lot of people are mentioning, Rangers fans here are mentioning, great goalkeepers of the past for Rangers. Peter McCloy, who was a sensational goalkeeper, a legendary goalkeeper for them, because, let's not forget, Peter McCloy was part of the team that won the 1972 European Cup Winners' Cup. And of course, let's not forget Stefan Klos. So thanks to lots of people who are mentioning some of the great goalies down through the years. And there are probably more from an era and generation long before myself, Roughie, Hugh and Steven. So it's all subjective to maybe the time you're in. As Steven mentioned there, he has played with Alan McGregor and he knows just how good he is. So with that in mind, a young player has come out and Jack Ross said, Josh Doig, well worthy. If he is going to win it, he's well worthy of it.
Well, I would have been astonished if he hadn't been nominated. I believe he should win it. That's very obvious for me to say. But he's the youngest in that quartet. At 18 years old, to have the season he's had, show the maturity he's had, and also show the improvement he's had over the course of a whole season, not just a little bit of a season, I think is outstanding. So delighted for him.
Yeah, it caused a little bit of consternation, that category, the 4 nominees, Roughie, but Josh Doig has had a good season and he's had a lot of games for such a young lad.
Yeah, I think it's the games that you've got to take into consideration. I think we've all debated the boy Patterson. He's only played 4 games and come off the bench and done exceptionally well, and he's definitely one for the future. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's the amount of games you play at that age and the level that you play at just edges the Hibs boy in that one. But I'm a Turnbull fan. I think he's come into the Celtic team and been a mainstay. But no, I'm going to stick with Turnbull. I'm not going to be persuaded. That 18-year-old one nearly swayed me. I didn't think he was that young. But now I'm going to go for David Turnbull.
Okay, you're going for Turnbull. I did question the validity of Nathan Patterson being in it, having played only 7 games, 3 of them starts. But is that down to the fact that the football writers maybe didn't see any other viable candidates? I don't know. You'd have to ask the majority of them. I've gone for Josh Doig in this, Steven. What about you?
I'm more of a Roughie. I think I agree totally that the players who are up for these awards have to have played a good chunk of the season. I think what's helped Patterson is that he's had such a big impact in a short period of time towards the end of the season. But Turnbull Turnbull's quality you can see. You've seen it in Motherwell. He's then had a massive setback. He's then bided his time at the start of the season at Celtic, and by the end of the season, as we're saying, he's been Celtic's best player. He's been only positivity at Celtic, and for that, being at a club like Rangers and Celtic, I know the pressures that are on you to compete and challenge, and how hard it is to become a mainstay. So I think that is what would put me towards him being the best of the youngsters.
Hugh?
This has got a headline. Arts captain doesn't rate the Hibs fullback.
What you like? Thank you.
I'm going to give you a short answer. I just ditto what Steven said. I just think if you considering the kind of season that Celtic have had, to be nominated as a player of the year in any category is quite an achievement. I think Turnbull will be. I mean, I've got high hopes for Turnbull. I think Turnbull can technically gifted and go on to be a real and go on to challenge for the big awards.
Yeah, okay. That's fairly short in your book, Hugh. I'll accept that. Yep. What about Lowland League, Hugh? This is the real big story this morning, that suddenly the Colts have offered the Lowland League the possibility of them going into that division with the financial incentive. Do you think it's an opportunity missed for the lower end of the SPFL?
I do. I think it was. I honestly think it was a no-brainer for the lower end of the SPFL. They would have got money. They've got better hospitality. There was no threat to their progression up the leagues because the Rangers and Celtic said they would contest promotion. I think it would have been obviously good for Celtic and Rangers. The young players playing against guys who are fighting for their mortgage or fighting for their extra payments, playing against men, which every footballer tells me, that's where they learned. They learned playing against men when they were 15, 16, 17. Every footballer tells me that. So I thought it was a no-brainer. Now it's gone down to the Lowland leagues. I think from the early indications this morning, Peter, is they're getting a far warmer reception with the Lowland League, and it looks as if that might go ahead. But I think it's a great way forward.
Here's what the Lowland League had to say on this proposal. The Scottish Lowland Football League can confirm it has entered into discussions to invite Rangers and Celtic B teams to enter the league for next season on a one-season basis. The discussions, which are at an early stage, have come following an invite to open talks from the Lowland League to both clubs to help solve the gap which exists in the player development pathway in Scotland. This could help some of the country's best young players and also bring significant benefit to the Lowland League. Discussions have been productive and will continue over the coming days. Ultimately, as a members' organisation, the clubs would need to vote in favour of this. All of our clubs have the exciting proposal, and consultation will be with them first and foremost. You a fan of it, Roughie?
Well, the first thing I would say I'd pick up for that is clubs have to vote on it. And that's when the problem comes, because they only need a percentage to say no. I told you a way back that the majority at one time in the first and second division were more than happy to invite Rangers and Celtic in. But when it went to a vote, all it needed was the percentage to say no, and it wouldn't go ahead. And I think the same will happen in the Lowland League. I can't imagine why they would say no if it was the same restrictions of just coming in there and being in there. I think all the clubs would vote for it. But it's the vote for me, because you don't know which way certain clubs are going to go. But if there's no promotion out of the Lowland League, I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah, well, it's only for one season, Stephen. Did you, in your development, did you get that opportunity, Stephen, to play against men? And if so, do you think that's something that a lot of youngsters are missing?
I think nowadays, everybody likes to use the word pathway. That is definitely not as it should be. We're not efficient enough. We're not maximising our opportunities for young players. For me, back in my time, being at a smaller club, you played in the under-18s, and if you're doing well there, you kind of moved into the reserve squad as well, which then back then you could have 5, 6 first team players playing. So that is where I got my test against men, if you like, professionals, was in that reserve league. But without a doubt, it's only going to benefit. It's going to benefit everybody, whatever division. You can argue they should go lower. They shouldn't. They shouldn't because they're very professional. But what it does is, in terms of Rangers and Celtic, they get to play competitive games. But the young players, like how many of the old firms' young players have went in the lower leagues, first to League One, League Two, and done nothing? But that's because they're turning up 2 nights a week, training with a team they don't have a real rapport with. They're just turning up for the games and to get their natural ability to get them through. Whereas now they can work week on week with a team, build the way they want to play, feel comfortable going into these games. So that's what the old firm will benefit from that. And the Lowland League teams all benefit from having good competition, a good teams who have got good following, who will bring a support, which will bring revenue to these clubs. I don't think it's as straightforward as saying they're going to come down and blow all these teams away and be first and second in the league. I think you'll be surprised because it's a different type of football to your youth teams and your youth development program. It's so different. So I think everybody wins from it. There could be a few teething problems and a few issues at the start, but it's definitely the way forward for us in the professional game as well.
Yeah,
the things, Peter, the things that have changed from not Stevie's day but my day. When I was 16, I was playing for Partick Thistle reserves. I was going to Ibrox and Parkhead, and there was maybe 5,000 or 6,000 at a reserve game, and you'd be playing against the guys that weren't in the first team at Rangers and Celtic reserves. And that's where you got your experience. You get used to the crowds being at a game. You get used to playing against experienced players. Unfortunately now, the big clubs just travel to maybe Airdrie play or travel to Dumbarton and play, and they don't get that feeling of, crowds in the game or playing against mature, experienced players, and they just have to battle away. I mean, we've got a young boy at our club just now, and I hadn't seen him playing, but I saw him playing up at Montrose there, and he's next generation, but he's not going to get into the first team. So what do you do with him? And that's a big problem for not just young players at our club, but young players at all clubs.
Yeah, some other news just breaking, and this will come as no surprise to Celtic fans. Celtic have sent Shane Duffy back to Brighton early. He's got an injury and he'll miss the last 2 games, so they've sent him back early. And it's £3 million they've spent on it, Hugh, and it just didn't work out for the lad.
It didn't work out is the biggest understatement in the world, Peter. It was an absolute. It's an incredible story. If you click back to when he was coming up, it was Irish international centre half, coming from a Premier League club. You just thought this is going to be a really strong signing for Celtic, and of course it never ever got off the ground. It unravelled from day one. I mean, it's just an extraordinary signing, just an extraordinary downward spiral. I think you can now look back and see at the scouting, why does a team that plays a high line and has most possession of the ball and likes to play out for the back, spend an awful lot of money on a centre half whose career has been built to, defending the 18-yard line and what people now call a low press, but we would call a defensive setup against better teams. Why would you scout a player that his strength was never passing the ball out? It was obviously his piece had gone if he had any in the first place. So it was just a shambles, and it unravelled from day one. And it's probably best, in fact, it is best for both clubs that they just draw a line under it and everybody moves on.
Is there anything that you've missed in the qualities that he didn't possess? You, I feel as if you've covered every one of his deficiencies throughout that entire answer there.
But the deficiencies, Peter.
I was trying to be kind for him. I was trying to be kind because I've absolutely slaughtered them all through the year.
But the deficiencies were just. I mean, It's not to say, it's just these deficiencies as well were going to be showing up in a system that didn't suit him. I mean, if he'd been playing for a team that was defensive every week and just getting his head in the ball, clearing the ball, not expected to be on the ball, not playing so far up the park at times where people's pace would expose him, he might have been, he might go back and play. I mean, the guy's obviously a decent footballer. I mean, the guy's played international football. What is it? How many caps he's got? He's played in the English Premier League. But anybody scouting him for a team that is liable to play three at the back, for a team, three at the back as well, when your centre half can get exposed down the side. If you're playing a high line, which means you can get exposed for pace, when you're playing in a team that is demanding that you play out for the back, I would say these are three things that, these were three boxes that he certainly didn't tick, Peter. I don't think it's been too harsh to say that.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Peter,
absolutely. Listen,
Peter, this is not the first time this has happened at Celtic. I could name you another two, unless you want to chip in with a couple of the same circumstances.
Janino, my point is this.
Janino.
I know, but there's a difference.
Lundberg,
There's a difference.
Lundberg.
There's a difference. There's a difference because Janino was a top drawer player. Martin just didn't like what he offered in the system that he played. Janino was one of those guys. He would be your number 10. He wanted on the ball. He wanted to saunter here, left and right. The other boy, Lundberg, his legs had gone. He had gone completely. His best days were at Arsenal. This boy wasn't even at the standard of those two players, Roughie. He wasn't geared. I think Hughes hit the nail on the head. My problem is not with Shane Duffy. My problem is the guy who drops the notepad or the document on Neil Lennon's desk and says, yes, Barkas is a goalkeeper that will thrive in this league. Shane Duffy is ideal. Albion Ayeti will be a star in this division. I don't know who scouted these players because they offered nothing to that Celtic side.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%, but it's still money going out the door. It's still massive amount of money that they would have been paying these two guys.
That's the root of the problem all season.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stephen, there is, as a manager, and you will know this in future years, Stephen, the technology's changed. So a manager can go into a room with about 10 televisions and all the digital video coming in of certain players. And some players and their agents will give you the best bits. But I still think there is a greater appreciation of a manager, Stephen, going and looking at a ground, a player playing. There must still be some time for a manager to go and look at a player and say,
100%.
Can he play?
There is now that on the surface, watching clips of a player isn't good enough. It's not good enough because, like you've said there, all you need to do is go on social media to loads of players throughout the world at the end of every season, bang up a video with their clips, and they all look unbelievable. But what you've not seen is the 90% of the time when they've been playing, the best thing you can arguably do is hunt these, for instance, a defender, hunt these videos down of games that they've absolutely been pumped and see how he done then for a defender, because that will give you a true reflection of what he actually is like when in a defensive team. So I think it's definitely been the root of Celtic's problems. I think for managers nowadays, I remember when I went to Everton and talking to like coaches and that, and they always said Julian Lewis-Scott was at Wolves. David Moyes went to watch him 26 times before he decided he was going to sign him. And that, even when I was at Kilmarnock, Jim Jeffries and Billy Brown, after training on a Tuesday, would head down to England and spend the next 2 days watching players constantly to try and see for their own themselves, is he going to be good enough? Do I like him? I totally agree that a manager's judgment on a player has to come with more than just a bit of video or a set of clips that's been handed to him from certain people.
Yeah,
Peter, the unfortunate one with Shane Duffy was when it was on the cards, how many people said, no way? How many people said, you're kidding us on, he's this or he's that? Everybody went, wow.
No, but with all due respect,
centre-half, no.
No, but with all due respect, Roughie, I personally with Shane Duffy come up, they said Celtic's interested in Shane Duffy. Apart from people who think maybe, there are some people who think, oh, he played for the Republic of Ireland, or there are people who think, oh, he comes from Ireland, he's signing for Celtic, great, and they get the streamers out. They're not the people who matter. I mean, there are some journalists who are lazy and say this guy's going to be great, or I've read in the last couple of days, some players that are being scouted and he's the next Lionel Messi, or this guy says he's going to be an absolute superstar. I care not a jot for what anybody would say, other than the people journalists who are in a country who've watched him. But then the most credence and credibility comes from the people who actually know what they're talking about, who are the people who are actually scouting them, know what a player's all about, and then the manager who goes and looks at him. That's all that matters. These people know players. I know managers who can look at a player and say right away, he's at this level, we're looking for this level. So I don't care if somebody writes he's going to be a world beater. It means not a jot to me.
The point I'm trying to make is, if the Celtic manager, who hadn't a centre-half to save himself, and somebody comes into his office and said, here, I've got a chance of getting you Republic Island captain, Shane Duffy, he's not going to say no. You're going to take him and see how it goes. But it never worked for whatever reason. But that manager's, with the centre-halves he had at his disposal, isn't going to say no to that calibre of player who's come out of a decent league.
Well, I don't know about you, Roughie, but Hugh, if somebody came into Neil Lennon's office and says Shane Duffy, and you can get him for this price on loan, the first thing I would have been doing would be going down there to try and watch him. If I can't watch him, try and look to some people that you trust to say, what are his qualities? What are his deficiencies? Surely you would due diligence, Hugh.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And the thing about it, Stephen makes a great point. I've always had this feeling, for example, we'll go back to non-footballers, goalkeepers, that if I was ever going to sign a goalkeeper, if I was a manager, I would say, show me the last 20 goals he conceded, not the last 20 saves. Don't want to see his last 20 saves. You could do a clip of me at the five-a-sides and you've got 20 great saves. Show me the last 20 goals he lost, and I'll make a judgment on him then. And that's what, I think you've got, see, when in a position as well, as you talk to great managers about, and they get offered players, and they'll say, no, we don't want him because I want an 8 and he's a 6, or I want a 10 and he's an 8. I don't, he doesn't fit into my team at all. He won't add to the balance of the team. He doesn't, the way I want to play, he doesn't play for that. It doesn't mean he's not a good player. It doesn't mean he shouldn't be an internationalist. It doesn't mean he's not a good pro, but he's not the kind of player I want. I mean, there's stories, for example, Peter, going back a long time with Wim Janssen, who was offered really big name players, really big name players at the time, and said, no, I don't want him. The guy I want is Harold Bratback, because I want him to play wide left and coming inside. I want a wide left player who's capable of coming inside. These big name players that you're offering me are not capable of that. I mean, that's my point of view. Get what you need, not what that everybody says
One other
is great.
thing that you might not. It also depends on what other options there was for Neil Lennon to sign him, or a centre half. If there's no other credible opportunities to get another centre half, then maybe he's just twisted because he didn't want to be short in that position. So there will be an element of that as well.
Yeah, I can tell you. I can tell you there was. I need to answer that point. There wasn't that element, Stephen. Shane Duffy, the Celtic had absolutely an eternity. They knew they needed a centre half for months before it. So the whole thing about the window, when he came in, they had months to scout centre halves, but they did their usual and waited. Am I right or am I wrong, Hugh? They waited right until the last end of that window. And suddenly, by that time, Europe was falling again by the wayside. So that whole argument wasn't there. But one thing I would say, Stephen, it's not an exact science, because lots of managers can make bad signings. My God, Sir Alex signed Cleberson.
Yeah, no, that's it. And Hughes' point on doesn't matter how good qualities they got. If you're shoehorning a player into your team, it's like the England golden generation. Shoehorning them into midfield didn't work. They were all great players.
Yeah.
So you've got to get the right
Yep.
players for the right positions.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you were gonna say something,
The other point that Hugh makes, if there's a video out there of your 12 worst goals that you've let in, it costs you a fortune to buy up all the videos before anybody else sees them.
Unfortunately, Roughie.
12,
is still on
12
YouTube. I know, but his is still on YouTube. It's called Andy Ritchie on a cold winter's day, who bends the ball over the wall, and Ruffy at his near post again.
One night I'm going to sneak into the STV archives and get that tape and just bin it.
Yeah,
set it on fire.
Oh dear. Anyway, couple of things. Roughie, St Johnstone, 4 players. Will this alter their chances of getting to the Scottish Cup final? 4 players with COVID. 2 have tested positive, and 2 other players are also being forced to self-isolate. That's a blow.
Well, first of all, we don't know who they are. You know, they've got a big pool of players. If you were going to tell me it was four guys that were going to be playing, then it is a worry. It's a worry for the manager. It would be a worry for any manager. So he'll know who the players are. We obviously don't. So we'll have to wait and see who they are. But it is a massive blow going into a game like that with that hanging over you. And I'm sure he would have wished it hadn't happened to him. And I'm sure the rest of the players would feel sorry for the 4 guys if it is 4 first-team players who are going to miss a game of that magnitude.
Yeah, well, they've released the 4 players' names, Roughie. It's John Brogan, Henry Hall, and Dave Mackay's out as well. So, and Kenny Aird is also there. So there's your 4 players. Here's the statement from St Johnstone on it, and I'll tell you, it's a blow for the 4 concerned. 2 members of playing staff have tested positive. They'll miss the Scottish Cup semi-final. Thankfully, after the latest round of testing, all results were negative. However, as a result of the positive test, 2 other players have been forced to self-isolate. We feel our staff adhered to the guidelines, and this has been largely out with our control. It's very unfortunate for 4 of our players to miss out on the important game on Sunday. However, we wish them well, and their health and well-being will always be our priority. And they'll keep the supporters up to date on this should they need to. Another little bit of news that came out, by the way, was Edouard, who looks as if he could be away with the French under-21 side and will miss potentially Celtic's Champions League qualifiers, although I don't think it's that big a deal to Celtic because by that time he'll be playing for someone else.
I think, that's all. I think that's just a matter of purely academic interest. Mr. Edouard will be off in the summer. The interesting thing about Edouard is Peter, great revisionism and hindsight. I always think, these kind of sliding doors moments. Imagine if Celtic had sold him last summer. There would have been an outcry, wouldn't there? Have been, but they'd probably got top dollar for him. And imagine they sold him and bought a replacement that just worked, like Tony has worked at Brentford, and who they were interested in. Always wonder what would have happened then.
Well, of course, this is another debacle because suddenly, with the John McGinn debacle, when they let him slip through their fingers, Stephen, Ivan Toney's at Celtic. He's there. They could have got him. For $5 million, he joins Brentford, and now they're talking about him going for $35 million.
Yeah, I think it's something that you've seen from Celtic over the last 3 or 4 years. That the transfer window, there was never any urgency. But I think that comes down to because everybody thought they were that far ahead. And if you look over the course over that period, every year it probably had a small effect, a small effect, a small effect. But then when you put it together, the end point is them not making 10 in a row. And Edouard was another prime example of that. And with the way that it all went on, it wasn't just bad for the club. It ended up being bad for him personally. Because he started the season not very well. The big games he doesn't produce, then he's getting a bit of criticism, and then he's obviously not happy that he's not been able to leave. So I would imagine this summer will be definitely slightly different with a new manager coming in. And I think when Brendan Rodgers came in, you've seen how he went about his business. He went out, got the players he wanted, and and started the rebuild straight away.
Yeah, a couple of things, Roughie, that have reared their head in the last couple of days that kind of have. I just had a deep sigh wondering about how players and managers and ex-players allow themselves to get to a situation where they have to give up their job. We had Maurice Ross on the programme a couple of weeks ago, Roughie, and I mean, I'm gobsmacked. He had a job, he got into a job at Notts County. Suddenly, he has to basically leave the club because of an inappropriate statement, again, with a kind of an undertone really of or being racist. And I know Morris himself has apologised profusely, and to the player in question, he says it was clumsy and insensitive. And even I think I'm looking at one of the ex-Arsenal keeper, Jens Lehmann, who's also lost his job. At this time, and there but for the grace of God go all of us, Roughie, but at this time, surely players should think long and hard before they gauge their mouth, ex-players especially, pundits.
The game's changed, Peter. The game's changed the way you can talk to players, and not just senior players, but younger players, and that's the way it's changed. I mean, I don't know if Stevie was ever in the era when some of the things that the managers that I had said some of the things that were 100 times worse than what we're seeing just now. But it was the way back then. That's the way managers spoke to players at half-time or full-time. And if it had been modern day, we'd be reading about it all over the papers. It's just the way things have moved on. Everybody correctly is trying to get everything in order. But, I mean, I don't know, Stevie could tell you stories. I could tell you stories about some of the managers that I played under, some of the things that they said to players at half-time. Old school, I would say, going back. But they were horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. If it wasn't you that was getting it, you would be sitting there going, I can't believe he's getting away with that.
Yeah,
well,
I think
personal things.
Things have
embarrassing players in front of their other teammates. That was the one that got me. For man management to really tear somebody to shreds in front of all your teammates and then expect them to go out in the second half and turn it on. I never ever got that into my head. I never knew how that worked.
Yeah. I think it's moved on for the better, Stephen, because apart from the fact that some people say all players can't take being, shouted at, and I think players can, but I feel sorry for players, in maybe Roughie's era, maybe in the early days of your own, and certainly when Hugh and I, down through the years, some of the players, didn't deserve being persecuted for whatever reason. And I still think we have another problem. I still think there's a bridge to get over with, homophobia in the football game, which a lot of footballers who might be gay, still feel uneasy about coming out because that hasn't really been addressed properly in my book.
100%. There is, and Roughie's point there, way back at the start, I can guarantee you there would be a high percentage of players get out the game when they probably had more than enough ability to make a good career for themselves because of that part of it. It was not nice, even when I started out, a lot of the older guys would be thinking, no, it's soft now. It's kind of like what a lot of the older players now say, the youngsters, they're snowflake generation. So it was brutal back then. And I would say through my whole career, it's been a learning process because what was acceptable back then isn't acceptable now. And it's not just in football, it's in the world. But a lot of these comments are made for cheap laughs, and it's not right. It does need to be highlighted. And we've spoke about it before. There needs to be an education programme definitely put in place for anybody that's falls foul of making daft remarks or things for cheap laughs. But I'm totally with you as well. Football's probably as far behind as probably any high-profile sport on addressing these issues.
Peter, can I give you an example? Can I give you an example of how things have moved on?
As long as you're not, As long as you're not
Do you
naming
remember?
someone in a situation.
No. Do you remember? Do you remember when the Saudi Arabia under-18 team came to play Scotland, and they all had beards, and somebody said
Yes.
somebody needs to check their ages.
Yes.
You know, if that had been now, that'd have been an outcry, absolute outcry. But it wasn't back then.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the context of the way it was said. You know, on this issue. But you're right. You know, it has moved on. Listen, I used to get pelters for having a bald face, and you know, people would call me fat when I was playing in the middle of the park. But you know, I just carried on, Hugh. Just carried on moving.
Just rise above it.
Well, I couldn't because I was too heavy. But I just moved a metre left and a metre right.
The other shout was, is he coming out of that centre circle? Is he ever going to move out of that centre circle?
No, exactly. Now we are being slightly flippant here on it, but nevertheless, as I always said, and I've modelled my entire game on Chris Waddle and Glenn Hoddle, Stephen, why run 40 yards when you can pass at 40? It's the only way you should conduct your life as a player.
So was it 40 yards at the pitch, or was it 40 yards to a teammate?
Who needs to actually run about when you can just either foot? Doesn't matter. That's my excuse.
That was
anyway.
my Peter. Just in a funny note, that was my favourite quote of George McNeil when he signed for Hibs, and the manager pulled him aside and he said, George was obviously a sprinter, Stevie. He was a world record 100-metre sprinter, but he was a footballer as well. And the manager pulled him aside one day and said, look, George, you're in this team because you have no ability at all. I just want you to be a decoy runner. That's what he says to him.
Absolutely. And listen, I'm getting absolutely pelters here on social media for it as well. But the great thing about, you know, from my own point of view and my grasp, as you're well aware of, Roughie, on social media, I have 7 sisters and 2 brothers. Nobody's going to offend me. They'd need a baseball bat over the top of my head. So I think I've grasped it, to be perfectly honest with you. Dave Cormack says Aberdeen have sold 1,500 tickets already, Hugh. Claims the club are looking to get to 15,000 for next season. I wish them well in that. I think once the next couple of signings beyond Brown kicks in, I think the Aberdeen fans are going to steam right in there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be passion there. I think that's now. I just think, Peter, that nobody has quite grasped the economic fallout of this pandemic yet. Because I think once everyone settles down, when furlough ends and we get back to some kind of life and firms reorganise, I think there's going to be job losses, and I think they're going to be pretty widespread. And I think that obviously impacts on season tickets. The other thing that impacts on season tickets as well, it's all right to ask fans to pay for a season ticket and watch it on the telly for one season, and the fans have been absolutely brilliant across the board at that. To do it for a second season, I think it's going to be a wee bit more difficult as well. But I've always held, Peter, that Aberdeen, you know, if Hearts and Hibs were getting 14,000, 15,000 season tickets, I always thought Aberdeen should be worthy of that as well. And I hope that they do get it. But I think there's difficulties coming down the line.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you on that, Hugh. Listen, I enjoyed Man City playing the other night there, but Chelsea, it's a bit dull, Stephen, wasn't it? Chelsea. I mean, I get caned off someone actually who watches the programme and says, you know, it's always likes and dislikes on the programme at times, but you know, we try and be like punters who are going for a pint. You know, we're no better, no worse. You know, we like to. I'm not a fan of Chelsea. I don't mind saying it because I don't know. I didn't like them in the 70s, and I managed to maintain that right through.
I like them. I like them under Tuchel.
Yeah.
I think that what I find, I seem to, the way they never seem to be out of position in terms of leaving loads of space for teams to naturally the players actually don't need to think about what they're doing because the space is there and it opens up for them. Chelsea very rarely get put in that position. Although I would say it's probably the worst Madrid team I've ever seen. That Chelsea could have won by 5 if they had their shooting boots on. But I enjoy it. I must say, I did enjoy the game. I do like the way Chelsea have it set up, and again, there has to be a bit of credit that goes to Frank Lampard because he initially started the build of this team, but Tuchel's took them to a different level, really.
Yeah, strangely enough, though, Hugh, are you not worried? I mentioned this on the programme a couple of years ago, and Roughie will testify to this, that because of the huge amounts of money in the English Premier League, lots of clubs would find it difficult as the English clubs continue to dominate semi-finals and finals. And boy, is it playing out.
Well, you've got the second best team last year. You know, the team that qualified is second best in England against the team that qualified as fourth best in England playing the Champions League final. So it is playing out. You know, that is the reality of it. You've got a Russian oligarch against an Arab state, basically, instead of two teams. I mean, I'm with Steven on Chelsea. I just think Tuchel is I mean, I watched him, as you know, as a Dortmund fan. He was the Dortmund manager, and I watched him at Dortmund. I thought I really think he's a brilliant coach. I mean, I know that's not the most original statement I ever made, but it was obvious then. He was very motivated, obsessed coach. I thought interesting that, you know, he did a job in Pep in the FA Cup semi-finals, and I wasn't surprised at that at all. And it'll be interesting to see what Pep's learned from that in Istanbul, because he will have looked at it very, very closely. And as Steven said, I think, see, nowadays with really big clubs and really big players, Peter, they want really good coaches. They don't want to come in and be coached by people that they feel are not at the top of the game. And I think Frank Lampard suffered a bit about that with a couple of the boys. I think he suffered with Jorginho. I think he suffered with a couple of the German boys, with Werner and Havertz, not maybe being impressed with the level of detail that they were getting given. Tuchel does take it to another level, and it's pretty obvious what he's done for Chelsea. But Lampard did bring in Mount and others, so he deserves some credit.
Yeah, and Thomas Tuchel has obviously, after the win, suggested they're not going to Istanbul to make up the numbers.
So yes, we will arrive with self-confidence and with a positive energy in Istanbul, and hopefully with everybody, no injured players. And we will arrive in Istanbul to win, not to be one of the participants. We want to arrive because we arrive with a clear focus to win it.
Okay, we will find out whether it's Chelsea or Man City. We'll get your thoughts on that near the time. Frank Kingles says, you like attacking football, Peter, but you didn't like Chelsea in the 70s. No, I liked Liverpool in the 70s. They were the ultimate attacking team in the 70s. I think they dominated it for most of it. And the team that dominated it before them, I think, might have been Leeds United. Anyway, it's all about opinions, only about fans liking certain teams when you were a boy. Who was your favourite team, Stephen, when you were a boy? English team?
I liked Man U just because Sir Alex. I think that was what drew me first of all. And then they turned out to be a fantastic team. And what he done constantly, you could reel off the amount of players he brought in that became idols.
Yep, good shout. Can't argue with it. Looking forward to the documentary coming out on Amazon. We played a little bit of it yesterday on the programme, so hopefully everybody will get onto that and have a look at it. I think it's going to be fantastic. Just before we go, Roughie, Ed Sheeran is now the shirt sponsor for Ipswich Town. Where did we get to that? I mean, now we're getting pop stars as the sponsor on Ipswich Town shirts, Roughie.
Could it be anything to do with money, maybe? No?
Yeah, absolutely. All Ed Sheeran is absolutely. I'm just looking at some other odd sponsorship deals. Here's a list that we put together. Wine Computers for Oxford United. Wet, of course, sponsored Clydebank. Flamingo Land were Hull City. Angry Birds, that was a surprise for Everton. I don't know if you were playing at that point. And there's one there, Pooh, for AC Milan. Probably not the best sponsor you want. And of course, Flowery Field was a cannabis company for Viner Victoria, which I presume it was legal in that country. And there's been a few down through the years. But I suppose at the end of the day, money's money, Hugh. When it comes in, give me Ed Sheeran any day.
Aye, absolutely. But see, when you look back at old pictures, Peter, of the classic strips, with no sponsors on them. I mean, I know why it's there, but I do hanker after the clean lines of the old strips. I've got a terrible habit being a football obsessive of sitting in YouTube watching old games at night and things like that, and seeing old classic strips with a gambling ad across or a drink ad across. There's something classic about it, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Hugh. In fact, apart from, I think, amazingly, I think Real Madrid and Barcelona at one point were able to dig their heels in for long and weary not to take a sponsor. And then all of a sudden they realised the value of taking someone that was going to plough millions into the club. Anyway, apart from anything else, thoroughly enjoyed the chat, thoroughly enjoyed the contribution from so many people here talking about their favourite strips, their favourite teams, players. The nominees are out. It's 4 Rangers players. We've had our say on who we think should win. You can have yours as well. You can go onto our Twitter and cast your vote. And don't forget, also, details coming up of a competition. You can win yourself some great gear on the way. You can download our new app, which is coming out shortly as well. But if you can, follow us on Facebook. Hit the subscribe button. From Steven Naismith, Hugh McDonald and Alan Rough, who's slowly but surely getting back to his best after a really rough session yesterday. From all of us, thanks for watching.
Expect the best used car deals